Studies have shown that around 4 to 6 of convicted criminals are actually innocent. This means that roughly every 1 in 20 cases results in an innocent person in jail. When prosecuting criminals, every individual should be treated the same. This is exemplified in the Sixth Amendment of the United States Constitution, which grants every citizen the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state. The criminal justice system is relatively simple in perspective. The plaintiff launches a case against the defendant in which evidence is considered through an impartial jury and in front of a judge. The impartial jury then should take these and only these simple factors into account: clearly and thoroughly explained evidence, the quality of the evidence and witnesses, the exigence behind the actions, the defendant's cooperation and character, and the defendant's criminal history. The jury should also be made up of a diverse span of U.S. citizens and should have no bias or former knowledge of the case. However, throughout the United States, external factors such as race, wealth, and nepotism have had a lasting impact on the criminal defense system. As said by Brian Stevenson, author of Just Mercy, capital punishment means them without the capital get the punishment. Welcome to Murdont, a podcast in which we will dive deeper into cases in which external factors alter the criminal justice system. First, we'd like to start this case with the case this podcast is named after, the Anthony Murdont trial.
As we dig into the factors of the case, it can be seen that Anthony and his family have developed control of the judicial system in Loudoun County, South Carolina. Since 1910, the Murdont family has been the go-to defense lawyers for all cases within this county. Whether it was a civil dispute, misdemeanor theft, or the death of citizens in the county, the Murdonts have been involved in the judicial processing of these occurrences. This control has allowed Anthony and his family to develop control of the judicial system, which was unhindered for 100+ years. In our exploration of Just Mercy, we uncovered the judicial problems that put the defendants in the case at a major disadvantage. This corruption relates similarly to that of the Murdont trial. The judges and the jury were familiar with Murdont, and many have worked with him in many prior trials. Throughout his tenure in the courts, Murdont was able to abuse the fact that the justice system was in defense of him and his abuse of the corruption and money he could extract from others. The judges and the jury were familiar with Murdont, and many have worked with him prior to many trials. These factors played a pivotal role in the continuing corruption that eventually led to the fall of Anthony.
Many similarities can be seen in the corruption the case entails. The corruption of this case is nothing new to the U.S. judicial system. Similarly to the Emmett Till court case in 1955, the South Carolina courts have shown a clear favorability towards white people. Both cases share the similarity of the white parties being favored. Anthony's race and status have allowed him to avoid many convictions from the state because of the connections he shares. This cooperation has been a part of the Murdont trial for many decades. Murdont family for many decades. The family has proved that their status is the reason for their extensive wealth. A dive into the Netflix documentary about Murdoch shows that this wealth stems from several fraudulent actions within the court. He has won cases for parties, but never paid the money to the families. Actions like these have allowed him to create such a wealthy status, which has abused throughout his criminal life. All the factors above are what makes this case so popular in the media. Anthony's ability to avoid corruption came to a screeching halt after the death of his own wife and child. The sudden homicide not only changed the course of his life, but exposed the flaws that he has been abusing.
When investigating the factors and considerations that should be taken into account during the investigation of criminals, a focus on maximizing the factuality of key areas is critical to producing a valid conviction. The first step is to ensure that the jury accurately represents the population in which the crime was committed. This means that an all-white jury should not preside over the case in a predominantly black town. The jury should also contain no bias for the case. Furthermore, when presenting the facts of the case, it should be assured that all information given to the jury is valid. No lies should be told, and if any are, the team should be punished for their misconduct. Lastly, the quality of witnesses and evidence used in the case is critical to supplying an accurate result. Mentally unstable individuals and pathological liars should not be on the stand. These people cannot be trusted and will only lead to more confusion on the jury. Optimizing the quality and clarity of the trial is the most important factor in acquiring an accurate decision. So Richard, I want to ask, how did the media's involvement in the Murdont case affect the trial?
Well, as the trial continued, more of Murdoch's corruption was discovered. The media dug deeper and deeper into his history in order to decimate his public image. This was not only an effective strategy by the prosecution, but it displayed the magnitude of the efforts of the media. The bias was clearly against Murdont. Rightfully so, his corruption, control, lies, and manipulation were put on display for the eyes of the entire public. The media's bias against Murdont created discussion in schools, the workplace, and many homes. This inevitably meant that the jury would be exposed to many facts that were not relevant to the case. In an anonymous interview after the conclusion of the trial, one of the jurors was asked about their knowledge of Murdoch's business manipulations throughout the past 30 years. They responded, "I mean, of course. How could I avoided it? It was everywhere. I couldn't open my Facebook without seeing an article about the case." This one statement speaks volumes on the impact of the media. The daily updates and outflow of irrelevant information not only put the public in agreed hatred of Anthony, but it even got to the jury. As the judges say throughout the jury selection process and the passing of the trial, the jury's opinion shall only be based on what is on the record. The facts presented in this case had almost nothing to do with what the media was focused on. This meant that when the people went home, they were informed of information that was deemed irrelevant to the case. This causation of the media's outflow and control of the public and jury has played an enormous role in the result of this case.
In Just Mercy, Brian Stevenson explores the systematic inequalities faced by marginalized individuals, emphasizing how race and socioeconomic status often play a significant role in shaping their treatment within the criminal justice system. An example of an impoverished individual facing conviction was Marsha Colby, a mother of 6 children and a 7th baby who was stillborn. This baby was stillborn due to Marsha not having the financial stability to provide for it through prenatal care, and when the baby was born, she proceeded to bury the baby due to her lack of knowledge of the alleged crime. However, a neighbor concerned about the baby's absence reported the situation to the police. Unfortunately, instead of considering the context of Marsha's poverty and lack of resources, she was then charged with capital murder. Unlike Anthony Murdoch's ability to utilize his power and money to help stay in control of the justice system, corruption was not in favor of the defendant in the instances mentioned in Just Mercy. Marsha's poverty-stricken lifestyle led her to the lack of correct prenatal care for stillborn and lack of information about the burial of the baby, leading to criminal charges. There were multiple inconsistencies in Marsha's trial, where she was charged with capital murder. Marsha was not presumed to be innocent until proven guilty, but instead was charged with capital murder based on the assumption that she intentionally killed her stillborn baby without considering her lack of money and prenatal care. The witness in this case, Marsha's neighbor, was not considering Marsha's financial status, but instead viewed Marsha's missing baby as a murder and a cover-up. The severely limited focus on the neighbor's report without extensive fact-checking, which contributed to a biased investigation. The poor quality of evidence in this case, grouped with the witness's lack of awareness and the court's blind belief in the weak of evidence, led to the conviction and imprisonment of an impoverished and uneducated Marsha Colby.
I'd also like to highlight Adnan Syed's case and discussed and picked apart in the Serial podcast. Similar to some cases discussed in Stevenson's Just Mercy, Adnan Syed was incarcerated on little to no evidence. Sarah Koenig, the writer of Serial, started her podcast by showcasing all evidence taken and not taken into account at trial. Against Adnan was a testimony of an acquaintance, his drug dealer, stating he buried the bottom with Adnan. There was little evidence in the case otherwise. However, after Adnan was sentenced to life plus 30 years in prison, a lot of evidence was uncovered, such as a potential alibi that had reached out to his lawyer before the conviction. Adnan was convicted with no physical proof that he did it, rather only testimony against him from his drug dealer. Many would see this as not enough evidence, but it is likely that he was convicted because there was nobody else for the courts to question. Many factors were not taken into consideration in this case, such as the lack of quality of the evidence, Adnan's character as described by family and friends, and the fact that Adnan will have little exigence behind his actions.
In this case, the jury have decided that there was not enough evidence to convict Adnan of first-degree murder, based on the general factors and considerations that should go into effect when convicting a criminal. Although sometimes the jury can be correct in convicting someone through little evidence after Adnan was convicted, evidence such as a lack of Adnan's DNA at the crime scene and a potential alibi for the time of Hayes' murder shows that the criminal system of the United States may have given Adnan the short end of the stick.
The Murdoch family trial has unveiled the disturbing reality that corruption within the courts can result in unjust convictions and enable individuals with wealth and power to evade accountability. The outcome of the case showed effects far beyond the individual defendants and ultimately led to the downfall of the entire family. Their privileged position and influence in the community shielded them from facing consequences for their actions, allowing them to evade justice for an extended period. This contrasts greatly with the situations of many impoverished communities where individuals without the same financial resources and social standing would likely face much harsher repercussions. This case draws parallels to other instances of corruption within the criminal justice system, such as Adnan Syed's case, where the exposure and scrutiny surrounding these cases have led to renewed calls for justice reform, highlighting the need for increased transparency, fairness, and equal treatment under the law, similar to the themes explored in Brian Stevens' book, Just Mercy. With many of these cases, the impartial jury failed to take into account simple considerations such as the quality of evidence and witness in the case of Marsha Colby and the exigence behind the actions of Adnan Syed. These examples collectively expose how systematic corruption can undermine the fairness of our legal system, disproportionately impacting the lives of the marginalized and reinforcing the urgent need for comprehensive reform.
Hey, Smith, Kanye West here, great discussion there. When I realized how the bars are accumulated and connected throughout this talk, I realized that life isn't about the tree and sticks, but more importantly, the bombs and leaves. Let the rights become fluid and every situation go no shit. Full control, full dress, let them know.